If the word feminism makes you mad, you probably don't want to keep watching this video. I'm Valerie Geary. I am a writer and a reader and a woman. Today, I'm going to be sharing 5 books with you, 5 feminist mysteries featuring female detectives. I was going to be in my cozy book nook. However, the lighting was not very good over there. So here we are in front of my cozy door. When I use the word feminism, for the purposes of this video, I mean about or related to women and women's issues. Books written by women featuring women protagonists, books with themes that reflect the inequality of the sexes, and books that prioritize the female view rather than the male view. Characters who are drawn in 3 dimension, who are allowed to expand beyond the typical gender stereotypes that we see in most narrative stories. And I believe the books that I'm about to tell you about fit that definition of feminism. Historically, policing in the UK and the US has been labeled as men's work. For decades, women who wanted to work in the police force had to work with women and children. They weren't allowed to police other men, and they weren't allowed to carry a gun. Even as policing began to open up and become more equitable in the 70s and 80s, women still faced a large amount of sexism and misogyny, and they found it difficult to have a career, to find a way to promote up, to move up the ranks. They were cast as the weaker sex, someone who needed to be protected rather than someone who could take on the tasks that policing required. But in the book The Craftsman by Sharon J. Bolton, WPC Lovelady sets out to prove everyone wrong. WPC stands for Woman Police Constable. The Craftsman is set in Lancashire, England, and it is a dual timeline story. Most of the story takes place in 1969 when WPC Florence Lovelady is new on the job. She's starting out as a young police constable, not really understanding the job, not really having a place to fit in, and trying to make a name for herself, trying to build a career for herself. She is the only female detective on the Lancashire police force, and she is handling her first missing persons case. 30 years later, we are introduced to Florence Lovelady again, only this time she is the assistant constable. She has clearly made some headway, made some waves in her career. When the book starts, the older version of Florence Lovelady is attending the funeral of the first murderer she ever caught, but something isn't sitting right with her. She's wondering if she made a mistake, if maybe the man that has been in prison, the man who died in prison for these terrible murders, maybe he was innocent, maybe she got it wrong. The book follows Florence Lovelady from the time that she is a new constable and into the future as she is investigating this older case. The case revolves around a serial killer who was taking children and burying them alive in these homemade caskets, in these homemade coffins. There were some creepy supernatural elements to this and a lot of layers that went beyond just your typical police procedural. One of the things that made this book shine so much was WPC Florence Lovelady. Watching her butt heads with the men in her unit, watching her try and find her footing and to stand up for herself when everyone was telling her that she was wrong about this case, that she just needs to butt out, stick to what she's good at, and she's saying, no, we need to investigate further. She had all of these ideas and these intuitions, and no one would listen to her because she's a woman, but she continued to push for this case and continued to push this investigation. I found her to be a very interesting, a very unique character. I enjoyed watching her emotional arc as she grew into herself, as she went from a very new, very green constable into a woman of her own power. Sticking to the UK for now, another female detective with a very smart head on her shoulders is D.S. Manon Bradshaw. This book is set more in the present day, but we do have another female detective who is struggling to fit into her unit, struggling to balance her personal life with her work life, and to kind of find a place where she belongs inside her job, inside this police force. Now, I actually picked up Missing Presumed twice. The first time, I just really couldn't get into it. I was having a hard time connecting with the main character, so I set it aside. Cut to a few years later, a friend was talking about it, and so I picked it up again and just was really hooked on Manon Bradshaw as a character. She is quite cantankerous. When you first meet her, she is a very lonely woman who has built up all these walls around herself. She has just come home from a terrible date. She listens to the police radio for company. She's not the best version of herself when we first meet her. D.S. Manon gets pulled into a case with a woman who goes missing. The woman is from a well-connected family, And it seems there may have been foul play involved. The door is left ajar, there is blood in the kitchen. The woman's keys and wallet are still in the house, and D.S. Mannon sets out to find out what happened to this woman. I think that what initially turned me off from this book ultimately became what I loved about this book, and those were the hard edges of D.S. Mannon. Her toughness, the way she struggles throughout the book to find meaningful connections with other people and to find balance in her work. I found her to be a rather relatable character in the way that she dealt with her loneliness and the way she built up these walls and pushed people away even as she should have been and needed to draw them near to her. There are 2 more books in this series featuring D.S. Mannon Bradshaw so far. I have read Persons Unknown and I really enjoyed that one. In that book, D.S. Mannon is handling another investigation, and this one is a little closer to home. That book also explores a lot more of her emotional arc as she begins to open up and let in the people around her. The 3rd book in this series is Remain Silent, and I have not yet read that one, but I am really looking forward to revisiting another story featuring D.S. Mannon Bradshaw. The next 3 feminist mystery novels featuring female detectives are set in the United States. The first one is set in Los Angeles and features a Black female detective, Eloise Norton. She goes by Lou. The first book in this series is Land of Shadows. This is by Rachel Houtsell Hall. When the book first starts, Lou Norton is getting reassigned to a new partner, this young white kid from a very white Colorado Springs who's just kind of green in all the wrong places. And they are not really getting along. They kind of butt heads. There's a little tension, a little banter back and forth between them. This young kid is kind of looking to make his name and stake his claim in Los Angeles, and Lou, who has been here a while, does not want to deal with his bullcrap. The Land of Shadows centers around a mystery involving a teenage girl who is found dead in a construction site. And this construction site is near the neighborhood where Lou grew up. And it's currently under some gentrification, some new construction. The top brass want to brush this death off as a suicide, but Lou sees some striking similarities between this young woman's death and her missing sister, who she believes is also dead. And Lou goes up against some prominent, very rich people to try and solve the case of this murdered girl. She runs up against a lot of sexism, racism, and classism as she hunts for the truth. Lou is a very tenacious woman who has very little patience for most of the people in her life, but there are a few friends who she just loves dearly, and that is one of the most endearing parts of Lou Norton. In addition to her just being a very smart detective who knows what she's doing, she also has this group of girlfriends who are there to support her and call her on her crap whenever she needs it. And I really enjoyed that part of Lou's character and how we get to see her interacting not only with the men in this department, but also with her girlfriends on the outside. Watching Lou with her friends, you see her in a different light. You see her behaving differently, speaking differently, acting differently, and it just made her a more fully rounded character. Land of the Shadows is the first book in a 4-book series, and I keep hoping that Rachel Houtsell Hall will write another Lou Norton book for me, but so far I don't think that's happened yet. But the 4 books in this series are well worth reading. Lou Norton is a very engaging character, and it is fun to watch her emotional growth throughout the entire arc of the series, as well as watching her solve the various mysteries and crimes that come up with each book. Inherit the Bones by Emily Littlejohn is also a 4-book series currently, and this one is set in a small town in the Colorado mountains in Cedar Valley, and this town is where everyone comes in the summer to hike and to swim and to play in the woods. In the winter, people come and snowboard and ski. 40 years before the book actually starts, something terrible happened in the woods. Cut to now, we have Gemma Monroe, who is a detective in the Cedar Valley Police Department. She has lived in this Cedar Valley area her whole life. She is 6 months pregnant, and she has an issue with her partner. She is not sure she can trust him. So there's this tension that we have because of sexism, and because they see her as a fragile woman who's pregnant and probably shouldn't be out on the job and should probably just be sitting behind a desk. But Gemma really wants to be a part of this investigation to solve this 40-year-old mystery that has come back to haunt them again. Another kid is missing. So she finds herself going up against some of the more powerful families in this Cedar Valley area. Now, Gemma is vaguely reminiscent of the female detective in Fargo, the pregnant female detective. You all know who I'm talking about. Except for Gemma is pretty much alone. Her boyfriend is off in Alaska doing a contracted work. He's a geologist. And she is having some jealousy issues there, some abandonment issues that really played into her character well. She's not just a cop, she's not just a pregnant woman, she's also just a woman who has some relationship issues and some big feelings and is a little uncertain about what her future is going to look like. She's trying to juggle and balance all these things and trying to figure out who she is, as well as trying to solve this murder investigation. There are 4 books in this series, and in each one we get to see a little bit more of Gemma and watch her development a little bit more as she comes to terms with herself as a mother and as a cop, as she continues to try to balance her responsibilities at home and at work. Finally, veering in a slightly different direction, I want to talk about Broken Places by Tracy Clark. Now, this one features an ex-cop, not a currently active duty detective. In this book, we meet Cass Rains, who is a Black woman in Chicago. She used to work for the Chicago PD and then was injured in the line of duty. She was shot, and this completely changes the course of her life. She was happy working as police until this incident happened and just kind of shattered everything that she thought she knew. After she's hurt in the line of duty, she goes through a period of time where she is processing her trauma. She doesn't necessarily finish processing her trauma, but in the end, she decides that she can no longer trust the police. She doesn't want to be part of that police force, so she quits and decides to become a private investigator. So when the book opens, we see a little bit of Cass Rains as a detective, and then it swiftly moves into her being a private investigator. The first case that she investigates is a very deeply personal one. A neighborhood priest is killed, and this priest has been like a father to Cass. He has also been like a father to the entire neighborhood. And the police are kind of shrugging off the investigation and saying, oh, this was like a case of suicide. The priest caught someone in his church and accidentally killed him and then felt so guilty he killed himself. But Cass is convinced that this is not what happened. She knows this man who was killed and knows that he would never do that, would never leave her behind like that. So she begins her own investigation into the death of this priest. And what I think was interesting about this book, in addition to like Cass being a very interesting character on her own, was the fact that she was an ex-cop. So she had a lot of this training and a lot of this history with the police force and a lot of connections still with the police force. Her old partner is still there, and she uses these connections and she uses these relationships to do her own investigation, but she also breaks the rules quite a bit. And that built a lot of tension within the book and within the story. One thing about Cass Rains that I found to be particularly interesting is that she has a very tough exterior, but inside she is very fragile, she's delicate, she's shattered, she's broken. But she doesn't always do the thing that she needs to do. She doesn't always reach out to the people that she needs to reach out to. She often goes it alone. She thinks that it is safer that way, that she can protect herself, when really the best thing for her to do would be to reach out, to be vulnerable, to ask for help. And so there are moments when she does, and those are powerful moments. And there's moments when she doesn't, and those are just heartbreaking moments. So there are 3 more books in this series. I believe it is probably going to be continuing. I think the newest one just came out. And I haven't read those ones yet, but I am interested in following more of Cass Rains and her development and the mysteries that she takes on as a private investigator. Chat with me in the comments. Tell me who your favorite female detectives are. Tell me what your favorite feminist mysteries are. I can't wait to find out what you've been reading and to hear your recommendations for what I should read next. Thanks for watching. Stay cozy. I'll see you next time.